Okay, we're going to look at tomb 255. This is known as Roy's tomb, and that's his name and title was. He was a scribe during the last of the 18th Dynasty under Horemheb. I want you to notice the skin color of this man here, and how, of course, their women would look about the same color and so on. Let's look at the color of these ancient Egyptians as he unlocks it. So this is tomb 255, 18th Dynasty. This is up right near Luxor. It's in the Necropolis that's across, which would be on the west side of the Nile, on the other side, of course, west side of death. Now this guy, I slowed it down here too because the guy that filmed this is just all over the place, but then he takes pictures with the same camera and runs them afterwards, but you can see all these signs. Now what's amazing about this is that it really looks like somebody painted it last week. There were people that called BS on this. They've tested it and so on. It's just in remarkable condition. And it looks as if a lot of these things, they were doing it up until the last moment. There are actually a few mistakes noted on these things. There are people that are just really all about Egyptian art and things like that, and they can tell you all about the colors and the exact combination used to make this kind of green versus that kind of green versus the blue that turns green versus this red versus the red ochre that you see, which is kind of uncommon here. Another thing is that they kind of pinked out their clothing here, and they say it's a sign of symbolism of blood and rebirth and so on. And there's also a symbolism during this time in the coffins of being red and white striped. And they say, well, that's the inner coffin whenever the body is just all wrapped up. But they had done this, but they haven't really found anybody who had like red and white striped things. This is another odd symbology. You see it all over the place. This thing we'll look at here later. It almost looks like a Christmas tree later. It's an upside down lotus blossom sitting on this stance with these other things that are inside of it. And on top is this loop. And it's all part of a ceremony that goes with the dead here. If we look at him, he kind of looks like the guy in that Disney movie or whatever with the camel and crap, you know. It's kind of, they flattened his face down a little bit, but you look how pale the women are, and so this kind of leads you to show you what race these people are, of course. And the oddity here is that he's really drawn just as pale as her. Look at his arm here versus her, it's the same. And they only brushed his face some and so on. Well, you're going to get to see some of the symbology on that red ochre and color usage here. Whenever women are always drawn pale, but men can be drawn pale if they are not doing anything or not in action, or if they're priests and things like that. But if they're in action, then they definitely have a deeper coloration to them. And then if they're actually doing something like a worker, they're going to draw them quite dark. And if you're doing something that's extremely active for the gods, again, you're going to have that same type of look to you. But yeah, and this cowling around the ear and stuff, it's a little different than you see most of the times in the art. And this is, again, into the 18th Dynasty, so it's just a little different, a little strange. And a lot of the art's been ruined in here, or some of it, because people trying to pick off people's eyes, which was, of course, real fun and famous. And Lord knows how much you get for an eye. Now, one symbolism that you find in here, too, is this priest. And this is very much like the priestess I just showed you in a video about the history of cannabis and all that type of stuff, and the goddess Shishat that was here. And this is like a male counterpart to that. He is a priest. If you look, he's got this elongated head. I don't even want to talk about it. He is drawn a little bit darker than she was, but not quite as dark as him. But then again, he's the man. So you'll have that effect. Now, in most stances, all of these scribes are always drawn pale because they're in the priestly class and so on. But whenever you're in action, you're in action. What's missing from the left here is he's holding one of those little peace pipe looking things with the dish and the bowl and so on onto it, and he's trying to appease one of the gods. And he's wearing the leopard skin here, so it shows you that symbolism that came from the leopard skin, and that being something like a stars Or really, it would be the reverse of it, wouldn't it? If it was all black with little yellow or white dots all over it, it would look more like the galaxy. But then her dress was kind of slowly turned into a galaxy dress, if you will, and that was the symbology that went along with it, of course, this of the stars and so on. But let's continue here. I've still got it slowed down, so it gives me a chance at least to vamp over some parts of this as it changes, and it's just going to be a slideshow from here. But we can look at Horemheb and what they do say about this. You see how pale she is. It's definitely a very Caucasian look, and that long, straight hair lined. Looks like Cher in one of the video things, and she has that extra cute right in front of her ear. This is one of the oddities because you don't find him in a lot of the tombs. This is his own little stele, and I guess because he's a scribe, he definitely has one. It's one reason this tomb looks so good is it didn't get robbed so much. It apparently got robbed once and then covered up. And here we're seeing the symbolism that, from the Book of the Dead. And we recently looked at something exactly like this, although the man did not have a woman next to him at this point. Instead of having his hands up in a stance of awe, he actually had it back here and twisted the wrong way, and it looked like he had two left hands, right? Well, this time he has the correct thing. The thumb's on top, so does she, and so on. And again, you can see how pale she is, and you can see how he's a little darker, but now isn't he just a lot more bright red ochre? And of course, he has the blue headdress, which signifies he's a god, and he's about to earn his blue headdress. And you see that in like Tutankhamun's cowling and so on of it. And what he seems to be doing is directing him, of course, in the Book of the Dead. Just outside of the picture over here on the right is Osiris. Here's the canoptic jars that hold all of his entrails, and he's like, well, here's all your guts, and you made it past, because right now in the Book of the Dead we'd be just past that. Strangely, you can't see it out of the picture here, but it's just out of the bottom of the frame. They didn't paint his feet. From calf down, they didn't paint him. It's literally as pink as her arm is right here. It's just one of the little mistakes that they do and so on. Another thing, they didn't double paint the Ankh. So you can see it's almost milked out. You can also tell that the wall here is quite dented, and they didn't get it real smooth, even though they tried to plaster it over and so on. Another concept you can see is, remember we talked about hands being weird shape. Look at that thumb and that hand. That really wasn't done too damn well. That really, somebody could have just spent another minute on that, couldn't they? Anyhow, let's continue. Oh, one thing too about this, all these medallion things that are on this, to me it's always looked like medals. I mean, of course, I'm guessing because my dad was in the service, and he had medals that looked like this red with two black bands, or blue with two black bands, and so on into them. Some of them little oak leaf clusters and so on onto it. So I always wondered if that had something to do with it. It's supposed to be like a piece of a flag type thing, but then again, and of course, looking into symbology, this doesn't symbolize a flag, but supposedly the order of the number of the colors has the symbology to it. And the oddity about this tomb, too, there's this one area in time where this isn't exactly the starfish stars over the ceiling and the blue ceiling that would have been there. It's just like a poppy flower. And against the borders around the edges, all the way around the edges, it's not even in the picture here, though. Hopefully there'll be a picture that might show it slightly and we'll be able to see it. But in those borders, it's actually the glyph for the sky, which looks kind of like a table a little bit, and that's right at the very top of the walls, and it's as long as the wall, like they stretch it out, and like going, so here's the sky. And then they put a bunch of flowers up top, it seems, that type of deal rather than the stars. Here's a part of the weighing of the heart. The other part's broken off and missing over here and stuff, but you can see these little pale guys here, and so they have to match up the weighing of the heart. This would have been just left of the other shot that we were looking at before. Wish they'd actually be exactly in order, but not necessarily so. Yeah. And here's Anubis in that Sphinx type pose with his protective ribbon that's onto him, and he contains the flail, showing he's going to be a protector over you in the afterlife. And this is that yellow background stuff that they only have during this time, with this tannish to yellow background. And it's pretty neat. And if you went left of that shot there, by the way, this right here is that sky, right? This is the sky hieroglyph, and it dips down over there and does the tip of the table, and way over here it's just out of shot. And all the extra designs in here, and of course these are all sayings, and they're all sacred little hymns and things that are on here. And you can see the goddess here. I believe there's a close-up of this here later. Here we have Hathor, and she's in that rich royal blue headdress, which you can see she's drawn as pale as hell too. All the women are drawing this paler color, and the men are symbolically drawing this red ochre. You can see that through Greece and the Mitanni people, Etruscans, Minoans, all kinds. Another thing, I don't know if it shows up in here. I didn't get to say it last time. Luckily the shot showed up again. You see how the ceiling wiggles real bad right over here? It comes along. You can almost see it in the red line. It just goes war, like that right through here. There's a big dip up in there, so it's not the most flat, perfect type thing either. They again, this is a scribe, so it's not a king. But the amazing thing is that a scribe would have something to this detail. Well, he's a master painter and all that stuff, so bam, he gets to have his stuff. Here's that red and white I was talking about effigy that they have of the sarcophagus here, and you can tell at this point he has earned his blue cowling, as you see Anubis have here, holding on to him. Now Anubis definitely darker here too, showing that he's in action. He's taking him to the afterlife, making it happen. And here you see the woman, very pale, but she's mourning. She's got her hands up. A lot of times when you see them, they'll have their hands up wailing or put it on their head. And strange things. All the way through there in Samaria, they would sit down in the dirt and throw dirt up over their bodies, and and tear their clothing and things like this, just to show how wretched everything was about everything. So let's just continue here and go on through them. But pretty neat showing here, and you can see that even his statue's pale. He has a blue lotus over his head at that time, though, so it shows you. Here's one of the things too that they do in their art, but not always. In fact, you can see it here and not on the other side. I believe in this same tomb is dark light, dark light, dark light. These are all the women, and this one seems to have red lips, and the other ones don't seem to have any red for their lips, although this one kinda looks like it. I don't know. Yeah, meh. But at the same time, they alternate a little bit. If you have them all the same color, it might get to looking like a cluster mess. Also, they've, for some reason, drawn them all with their arms up, so all you see is a bunch of hands over their heads and so on. But they're all in mourning. And then again, you see it again here with the males, where it's lighter, darker, and you can see the hair is just drawn in these real straight streaks here, so it's not even really curly necessarily like you see some of the other ones. Oh, they found evidence too, I guess I've got that in my hair video though, of these curling rods they used to do, where they would heat them up a little bit, then they wrap your hair around them and just hold it for a while, and they'd put little curls to them, and they apparently used them whenever they mummified people to make you as pretty as possible. That's kind of the name of the house where they mummified you at. It was the House of Beauty, or the House of Making One Pretty. And so, your last salon, if you will. Now, here's that depiction that's on the other side that mimics the same priest. And you can see by him being in action here, the same bulbous-headed guy. So being in action here, he's slightly darker than he was. Real pale woman here, but this is really just a Shabti doll, right? And what he's doing here is he's got that smoking pipe we were talking about, and he's trying to give an effigy to him again with the leopard skin suit on, right? And he's got something that looks jet pillarish, but it's got the water coming out of it, so he's giving libations and so on to it. And kind of neat. This guy over here has got a little hacksaw in his hand, or a machete type thing, and he's a worker. So he's going to be a little bit darker than him. Of course, workers are always darker than priests, but whenever you see them in action, like something like this, where they're driving cattle, then it definitely looks where they're definitely darker, and so on. In fact, even the woman here, which I guess is just out of frame, and you can just see the edge of it, it's about the same color, but all the rest of the women are drawn pale. Well, they're I don't know, drawing the cattle and doing the things and going through the ritual, and then because they're in action, they have this type of mode. Somebody definitely came and said that they drew these cattle first, drew the people next, but then the people that painted it painted these people, then the cattle people came, and they don't think it's the same artist. I guess they can just tell from style. Then again, I draw horses and stuff real good and people not so good. So I don't know how they really could tell something like that. But it's in one of the little papers where they think that and something else was drawn by this other group. And the whole ceiling was done by a different group, of course, than the people that drew all the masterworks here. Again, we see Horus here about to take him. And this is whenever he takes him to the weighing. You can see he's a little more concerned here, but now you still see he's pale, pretty much as pale as the woman is, and Horus is darker. He's in action, he is not. And big necklace going on. So this is also usually looks like dots and leopardy stars in here, at least in the other picture I think it does. And through this area or time, these dynasties, it has that look. Here's another look at those women who are all in mourning. Everyone's in mourning here, and just out of frame is this musician playing something that looks like a flute, but it's quite thick. Almost looks like he's playing a sub sandwich. And here you don't see much variation at all between the women, and you can see they're doing different things with their arms. A lot of them having them up, some having their hands right in front of their face, crying and so on, and other ones having it above their head. This would seem more natural to me for you to have, but sometimes the Egyptians wanted extreme symmetry, so it should have that. It should have, everybody has their hands up, everybody. And whenever they said, oh, well, the women were mourning, they had their hands up, they were like, well, everybody's got their hands up. You're supposed to making it look like a natural mourning ceremony. Here they are paying homage to the gods, and you can see how pale she is in the male again here too. And oh, it's another shot. Man, it's just out of frame. I know you don't get it because it's in the bottom quarter of an inch, but below his pants, he's as pale as his legs are right there, and just as pale as her arms are. They didn't paint his feet. Somebody messed up and didn't paint his feet here, and that other photograph you're looking at, it's not the same one. And so here we see him going into the house of the afterlife. He has the lotus on his head, got the lotus thing in front of him going on. She does too. They're holding that staff I just told you about, the Waz staff. And you see how pale she is. Here's that close-up we were talking about of the Hathor symbol and the female goddess. Definitely a Caucasoid form here, but the blue is very rich in this too. Everything held its colors extremely well. Some people say because it had a whitewashing background, almost like putting down a primer layer, that it held the colors better. And so now maybe, I don't know, it's real small, isn't it? But now you can see that priest there, whenever he's in action, he's a little darker than the women. You can see they're both kind of pale, and then he's a little darker, but he and that Christmas tree thing I was telling you about, and the ring that's on top of it, like an ankh stuck into it, ish, but he's also got the little smoke and peace pipe going on thing here. So that's what it was, you know. Sometimes I wish they'd just do a whole little spot and a spot and a spot, and you want to see the left side overlap the right so you know what you're looking at in order, but hey, I'm not the one that put this together necessarily, so here's another close-up of it, and you can see to the left there's the same guy standing, but you can't see the smoke and peace pipe. Terrible picture here though, because it looks like the guy, you can kind of tell he's got a 35mm and a separate flash, and the flash is flashing way over here off screen to the left, and so it looks darker and darker, and the flash almost doesn't work over here, although this person looks a little darker, but then you can see him here, and he's really the same color as her in this shot, and they're doing the little lotus thing and just sitting there and watching. And this is another ceremony, and I believe just to the right of this maybe some dancers, if this is the right picture, and the two women here that are doing their ceremony along with it. This is what the tomb looked like, and so I'll read this off to you here real quick, but it's the 18th Dynasty of Horemheb, which was from 1306 to 1292. Okay, Horemheb. And Roy, he was a royal scribe, steward in the estate of Horemheb and Amun. The tomb highlights is the burial of Roy, including a funeral procession, It shows with his presentation to Osiris with the weighing of the heart, and we were looking at that. The niche contains the remains inscribed with a hymn to Ra, and oh yeah, on that stele too, there's the ceremonial boat at the very top of it. You can almost not even make it out. I don't know if you could through the vid here, but little boat at the top of it and so on. The ceiling frieze is decorated with Anubis jackals and the heads of Hathor, and both are well preserved. What it doesn't mention on here is at the very top is that symbol for sky, and it's like stretched out real long, so they stretched out the sky. See how that kind of works? Let's take a look at this a little bit more here and see if we know about tomb T225 or 255, which is Roy's tomb. I pulled it up here, and here we are on Wiki, and it shows you it, and it's got really that's it, and it shows you how nice these are painted here, and the vivid relief that you see here. And this is kind of what we were looking at, and this is the weighing of the heart leading to Osiris that we never saw in the other picture, but somebody took his head off, so it really doesn't matter. His hands are green, but other than that, every bit of him is white with no head at all, so we really can't see the depiction of him. Here's Hathor up here and so on. Here's the weighing of the little pale people that we saw sitting down here, the females holding up the body and so on, the two eyes and the pyramid form in between the two eyes of Horus, and the sun and the moon that we've been talking about also recently. And so he's part of the Theban Necropolis, so across from the west bank of the Nile, opposite of Luxor. So it's up in that area. The sepulcher is a burial place of the ancient Egyptian Roy, who lived at the end of the 18th Dynasty during the reign of Horemheb. And so let's look here at Horemheb, and you can get a closer look at him here. I didn't pull it up. Horemheb, and so the end of the 18th Dynasty era. And get to see a real good close-up of what this guy looked like. He's one of the ones that they say they kind of, some of the statues, they'll be extremely stylized, every single one of them, and there might be one or two that are not. Just like in the earliest dynasties, they would make the reserve heads, and then they would stylize from there. So I think we can easily tell what this man looks like. And so yeah, that was right there too at the end. And this he has connections to Tutankhamun and everything here. Let's see, he had no relation to the preceding royal family other than marriage to Mudinmet, and who's the daughter of the predecessor Ai. So you have Tutankhamun, then you had Ai, and then Ai's daughter had married him, and he supposedly had some connection to the royal family, and they put that together, and that was Horemheb. He was only in power for 16 years. Oh, I passed it. He ruled for 14 years, somewhere between 1319 and 1292 BC-ish. Of course, things can be a little bit off, though. Yeah, but he's started what began against the preceding Amarna rulers, and that they had with the changes that kind of went on during there. So this was kind of during the change. Horemheb demolished monuments of Akenaten, reusing their remains in his own building projects, and they usurped monuments of Tutankhamun and Ai, and they pretty much marked Tutankhamun off the place. That's why really people didn't know about him, because they didn't know really to look for him, because they pretty much took him out of existence, and that whole little family thing. And it's kind of funny, but that's one of the most famous ones that we know, well, especially because of Tutankhamun, but Akhenaten and the whole hookup that's there that they wanted to put out has become kind of the most famous one. It's going to go backfire, but Horemheb presumably remained childless, since he has appointed his vizier Paramis as his successor, who would assume the throne as Ramses. And so that's where Ramses had come from. And this guy here that showed up, Meneptare, or of Tyre, Menepta Tyre. And so does it have hookups to Tyre? Yeah, it looks like there might have been a lot of hookups, but he had a Memphite tomb, and so you can see some of his other pictures and stuff and how that would have looked, and it just kind of looks regular old crackers, but it in itself was odd. They had the little lines of the linen, but up under his chest here, kind of doing the ribbish thing, and you can see this little neck cowling that makes it look like some kind of Greek tunic type thing. It was a little bit different than everything, but then again, yeah, fan bearer right side of the king. So it's not about Horemheb, it's about Roy, but they don't have a picture of what Roy looked like. Just those paintings on the wall that are always somewhat symbolic. And then again, so are these statues, but this is one of the ones that are supposed to kind of have caught so the way somebody actually really looks, putting a fake beard on them and doing the thing. And anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. Tune 255. Yeah, pretty cool. Peace.